So the disease that I chose to research was cholera, which is a disease that causes diarrhea and is common in developing countries. So this is a cholera, or a Vibrio cholerae bacterium. You can see they have a flagella at one end of the cell, which facilitates for the cell's movement, both inside of a human host and in their environments. This type of cell, Vibrio, is characterized by a common-like shape and is generally associated with illnesses that are caused by eating raw seafood or dirty water. So, Vibrio cholerae bacteria live in aquatic environments where their populations persist with the aid of biofilm formation. Biofilm is a slime which develops when free-floating microorganisms, which would be in this case the Vibrio cholerae bacteria, they attach themselves to a surface, which for the Vibrio cholerae would be zooplankton, phytoplankton, exoskeletons, insect eggs, that sort of thing. And the Vibrio cholerae bacteria take carbon and nitrogen from chitin, which is the polysaccharide that gives these creatures hard shells and beaks. And that biofilm it proliferates as they take carbon and nitrogen from the creature that they've created a film on. So Vibrio cholerae are ingested, whether it be through drinking water or food, by human beings, and once they're inside of a human host in the small intestine, they colonize and proliferate, and they release a toxin. The factor which triggers the release of the toxin is unknown, but the toxin causes causes diarrhea and vomiting, which releases more Vibrio cholerae bacteria into the environment and back into water sources, especially in developing countries with poor sanitation systems, and they're re-released into the environment in a bigger population and are re-ingested by human beings, and the cycle starts all over again. So this diagram demonstrates how Vibrio cholerae evolve after emission from human hosts. They re-enter a water source and form a biofilm or attach to one of these illustrated organisms, and then they live in the water source and sort of fester there until they're re-ingested by another human host and continue on. So this diagram gives you an idea of the two circular chromosomes which make up Vibrio cholerae cells. The red sections of these chromosomes illustrate the portion of DNA that were acquired from other organisms. ORIC1 and ORIC2 represent the unique origins of replication. DNA A encodes a protein that's likely to initiate replication of chromosome 1. The other sections play various roles in the cell's toxicity, so whether or not it is a pathogen, because not all Vibrio cholerae cells are pathogenic. The shape of the cell is defined as a bacillus, which refers to the bacteria's rod-like shape. They have a cell wall, which you can see in the picture in the upper left-hand corner. The antigenic structure works sort of like they have a flagellar H antigen, which is located in the cell's tail or the flagellum, and a somatic O antigen, which is located in the cell wall. The somatic O antigen is what allows for the separation of the species into pathogenic or non-pathogenic varieties, so whether or not they cause cholera, which is a little bit what I was talking about with the two chromosomes and the cell toxicity. So whether or not a Vibrio cholerae cell is pathogenic is inherent within its chromosomes, but the most common epidemic pathogenic strains are V. cholerae 01 and V. cholerae 0139. So you can see here this microscopic photo gives you an idea of the size of the cell, which is generally between 1 and 3 micrometers in length, and between 0.5 and 0.8 micrometers in diameter. So according to Sajeev Handa, who is the director of the Department of Medicine at Rhode Island Hospital, 24 cases of cholera were contracted in the U.S. between 1995 and 2000. At this point, it's safe to say that we're not really affected by cholera in the U.S. because of our good water and sanitation systems, but citizens traveling to other countries, especially developing countries, they need to be aware of the risk because 2.8 million cholera cases occur every year in endemic countries. You can see on this map, well, the very darkest countries are places where cholera is non-endemic or not prevalent, but in the countries with darker green, the darkest green symbolizes where it's the highest incidence rates, and the lighter green symbolizes lower incidence rates, or the white symbolizes nearly none. In Africa, the mortality rate is generally around 4%, which is the highest in the world. The World Health Organization estimates that between 100,000 and 200,000 people die annually from cholera. So, although it's not as prevalent as other diseases, it's still a relevant concern in the modern world. So the global fatality rate of cholera is 1.2%. If it's treated quickly and effectively, it's not a serious health risk. But the World Health Organization estimates that in high-risk areas, mortality rates can exceed 30%. This is in areas with limited access to healthcare or highly inefficient healthcare systems, and the figure 30% is a pretty drastic one, and it refers to specific places, small, like a small village or a small town, not necessarily countries as a whole. So the CDC cites these as the symptoms of cholera: watery diarrhea, rice water stools, vomiting, rapid heart rate, loss of skin elasticity, dry mucous membrane, low blood pressure, thirst, muscle cramps, and restlessness or irritability. A person with severe cholera, which is 5 to 10% of those people affected, would exhibit all of the symptoms, but someone with a less serious case might not exhibit any of the symptoms. 75% of people infected with cholera do not show any symptoms at all. But for 7 to 14 days after they're infected, the bacteria is present within their feces and can infect other people. The rice water stool is specific to cholera. The name references the excretion's apparent similarity to rice, to the water used to wash rice, which is generally pale and cloudy. This diagram sort of gives you the general idea of where the symptoms occur. So cholera is the most prevalent in places without effective sanitation or water systems for obvious reasons. People drink the same water that they dispose their waste in, and it passes from an infected person's stools into the water system where it contaminates drinking water or food. So contaminated water that's been used to brush teeth, wash dishes and utensils, prepare ice or food, they can all transmit cholera. And the risk is especially high, even when cholera originates in the water source. The risk is especially high when there's a cross of drinking water and human waste. You can see in these pictures, these are areas where their sewage system is the exact same as their water faucets. So to prevent cholera, drinking safe water and frequent hand washing is important, but it's also important to use water that's safe, that can be boiled water or treated with chlorine. And obviously separating human functions and water sources is a good way to prevent cholera. So avoiding raw foods unless they have good peels in countries with a high risk of cholera, cooking shellfish thoroughly, they're all good preventative methods. There are only 2 vaccines available on the market, Dukoral and Shankal, neither of which are available in the United States or are highly recommended because they only provide partial protection and they don't last for a very long time. It's said that there are less than 400,000 oral vaccinations currently available for shipment from these companies that create the vaccine. And if someone was to contract cholera, the best way to battle it would be through oral rehydration treatment. And oral rehydration salts can be purchased at drugstores and allow the body to become rehydrated after diarrhea or vomiting, because the water and electrolytes are still absorbed into the gastrointestinal tract even during these times. In most cases, oral rehydration is the difference between life and death. And people who are affected by cholera need to seek immediate medical treatment because antibiotics and more professional health care, aside from oral rehydration treatment, can be the difference between a long case of cholera and a serious case of cholera. Antibiotics can really help in the cure. So there have been 7 cholera pandemics beginning in 1817 when the disease was spread from India on trading ships, crew members, and infected cargo. Except for the very last outbreak, which began in 1961, all of the outbreaks originated in India, which is interesting. I think something to do with probably the climate. The 7 pandemics range from 6 to 53 years in length. In 1992, a new strain of cholera, O139, was discovered. It's been identified in 11 countries and is a cause of worry for an 8th pandemic. In 1892, Waldemar Hafkine, a Ukrainian bacteriologist who was working in India at the time, developed the first human cholera vaccine, and based on the success of the current vaccines, it would appear that they haven't made much headway on that front. In 1894, British Dr. John Snow identified contaminated water as the source of cholera, which was an important discovery because they could at that point begin to combat it. So, for the most part, Vibrio cholerae bacteria are killed by exposure to stomach acid, but those bacteria that make it through to the small intestine cause neutrophils to enter the mucosa of the small intestine, the lining. The levels of white blood cells increase to help reduce the invading population. Phagocytosis helps to reduce the bacterium. So the ability of the small intestine's mucosal layer, which is where the neutrophils will enter, the ability of the small intestine to fight the infection is determined by B and T cells in the mucosal layer. Helper T cells play an important role in ensuring that B cells can fight the antigens with their antibodies, and this is key to the mucosal immune response in the small intestine against the cholera toxin. And that's what causes diarrhea and vomiting. That's what causes the symptoms of cholera. So cholera strains O1 and O139 release a toxin that attaches to intestinal walls and causes excess fluid to be secreted into the intestine. And this is what causes the rice water diarrhea, and that is in a little more depth. What happens is the toxin, which is called collagen, binds to intestinal epithelial cells and causes a rise in cyclic adenosine monophosphate, which is abbreviated with the term CAMP, and it's derived from ATP actually. So the toxin collagen creates a rise in CAMP production, and massive amounts of electrolytes and H2O are secreted into the intestine as a result. And that's what causes diarrhea, specifically the rice water diarrhea. So once someone's been infected with a certain strain of cholera, whether it be O1 or O139, it's less likely that they'll be infected again with that specific strain thanks to T cells and B cells creating memory, and they will have more, or the B cells will have more antigens or more antibodies to combat the antigens. These are my works cited.